I would now like to welcome our third panel on Federalism and Decentralisation, Institutional Alternatives to Centralised Authority. It will be moderated by Dr. Prajakti Kalra from the Cambridge Central Asia Forum, and I would like to invite Dr. Zulfia Abawe to join us at the front. We will also be joined by Mr. Matin Bek and Dr. Timor Sharan on Zoom. I'll hand over to Dr. Kalra.
Hello and welcome to the third panel. Thank you to Zalmai for inviting me to chair the panel. I've been coming to these conferences for the last 3 years now, so it's my pleasure to be here again. I'm going to chair this panel. We have one in-person panelist, and then we have 2 people on Zoom. Can they hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I say you have only 3 minutes left, would you please actually listen and not make me dance like last time? I was dancing on the floor last time, trying to get the attention of the online speakers. So I'm hoping that this will be easier this time. So we'll start. Should we start with? Let me just look at the program. Who are we starting with today? Did you want to start? Or? Martin. Okay, so I'll introduce Martin first. So Mr. Matin Bek is a fellow at the New America's Future Security Program and a former senior Afghan government official. He served as chief of staff to the president and was member of Afghanistan's peace negotiation team in Doha. He previously led the country's local governance body and served as deputy director of the National Directorate of Security. Bek holds master's degree in security studies from Georgetown University and in political science from Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Dr. Kalra. Good afternoon to everyone, to my co-panelists. Well, it's morning in Washington here. So I'll try to be very brief. As I said earlier to the organizer of the conference, I would be mainly speaking from a practitioner perspective. My other 2 colleagues, one of them is my former colleague, and the other, although he is more now probably we'll talk about on the academic perspective, but I will try to share my experience, what we saw in past 2 decades, but especially 10 years of my experience with the government and my career. I started my job with local governance when I graduated from Jawaharlal Nehru. I was very influenced by India's political system, and the way I see the diversity was seen as a strength. And I was always puzzled how we could have a system in Afghanistan which could address the question of diversity and how we could utilize the potential the society has in a country after 3 decades of war. My experience in the government, although we started from a very strong centralized system from 2004 Constitution, what I figured in the system, there are a lot of good work has been done in terms of law, procedures, and setting up the government administration, but the main question was the question of the political representation, the governance, or the response of the center to the periphery. My first observation was what I could see, the center was overwhelmed. It could not respond to the periphery's demand, or could not address the political grievances of the provinces or districts. And we always keep hearing complaints from all parts of the country that center create problems, then facilitates their development, or rather discourage the credibility or any local initiatives. So, probably I will leave the rest to the question and the session answer and question, or other questions other panelists will have. But my conclusion from the system was the centralized model had reached to a dilemma. There was an unspoken consensus. It will not work. But because of lack of political willingness, no effort was taken, or any effort. Even we tried, with Dr. Sharan is here, and he also have done a great work with our other colleagues from the government. At least we tried to deconcentrate. Even the deconcentration effort would face problems or face political resistance. So my understanding is, if the Republic had endured, it had no other option than going to a decentralized model of governance. We had already reached a dilemma or a deadlock. The system was not working anymore. Even we tried with our colleagues, we had even made a commitment that at least we tried with the municipalities, where in our constitution, the municipalities, or municipal mayor or municipal council in the cities had to be elected. But for political reason, for technical reason, but mainly political, we were not able to hold the election. But we had made a commitment, at least we should start from the big cities, some of the cities, to have the election. But unfortunately, the system collapsed, and that's a different thing. So that's my brief opening remark, and I will leave to the rest of my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you very much. I didn't have to do anything today. You definitely kept the time, so we'll have enough time for Q&A after this. All right, the next speaker is Dr. Timor Sharan. He's a senior fellow at the Center on Armed Groups and the founder and executive director of Afghanistan Policy Lab, the first policy hub focused on experimental research, policy modeling, behavioral insights. Prior to that, he served as a Deputy Director General for Policy and Programs at the Independent Directorate of Local Governance. He has also been a visiting fellow at the Global Security Program at the University of Oxford. He's advised governments, international organizations, including USAID, Open Society Foundation, and Frederick Ebert Stiftung. The floor is all yours, Dr. Timor.
Thank you. Hello to everyone. Two things. One is that I have to leave at 3:30 because Shahzad is away, so I have to get the kids. Secondly, what I will quickly present today is based on a paper that I wrote for this edited volume by the Afghan academics called The Future of Afghanistan. And the article that I drafted, the title Towards a New Horizon, the Future of Political and Administrative System in Afghanistan. I want to make 5 points based on this paper. One is the debate over Afghanistan's future governance and administrative structure continues to be a source of deep division and contention among various political elites and centers of power. Now, there seems to be two very extreme views here, and they're not listening to one another. There is hardly any compromise when it comes to the discussion of the political system. At the moment, there are three key positions, established positions. The first position is that we need to keep the status quo, a unitary system that is centralized, a republican constitutionalism, and that this needs to remain very centralized. Others criticize that this is essentially domination of one ethnic groups over others. The second, at the other end of the extreme, is colleagues who discuss federalism and decentralization. They want a radical shift and equitable distribution of power and resources. In the middle is what we have with NRF, National Resistance Forces, and the former Jamaat colleagues who prefer a sort of a power-sharing model through either a parliamentary or semi-presidential system. And the reason is very similar based on 2009-2014 election, that within, it's rather selfish actually, that within a power-sharing mechanism, the presidency will go to one particular group, the Prime Minister will go to another. Therefore, we will protect our interests in the medium to long term. Just to say that this discussion, naturally is incredibly politicized with very little compromise. Second, there is a lack of technical and political nuances and understanding of how a political system operates, and lessons learned from countries around the world. And the third one is there is an incredible lack of imagination when it comes to the discussion of future political system for Afghanistan. So what we ought to do is bring in some imagination, depoliticize this conversation, innovate in terms of the design of the system, and compromise to make it work. Compromise based on the realities on the ground. It's incredibly difficult to convince those who are in power to decentralize. And it seems to be very ideologically driven by those who argue for decentralization. Another point that I want to make is this: how conflicted this argument between decentralization and federalism is. So while these two closely related, decentralization and federalism are fundamentally distinct concepts. Decentralization refers to the transfer of authority, responsibilities, and resources, either through deconcentration, delegation, or devolution. The argument we have in the United Kingdom around devolution, from the center to periphery, to different levels of administration. Now, decentralization encompasses delegating legislative, fiscal, and administrative authorities. So it could get different variety of that system. Federalism, in contrast, entails appropriating state sovereignty among various levels of government. So what we have in the US, some US federal states are able to make foreign policy at some level, taxation and so forth. So these two are incredibly conflicted, and that's where confusion lies within the colleagues who argue for decentralization of funds. The third point that I want to make is we need to look back at our history in terms of political design, and there are some good lessons learned, there are bad and terrible lessons learned. So if you look at Ahmad Shah Abdali, Timor Shah's period, where you had localization and regionalization, where the regions could generate revenue, tax population, there was rule of law and police, it was essentially a regional decentralization of power, both at the regional level, but also at the local level. And then you have the Abdurrahman Khan's period, which is incredibly centralized, and what we inherited since then is essentially based on that. So there are lessons learned. So I don't want to go into so much details. And the last 2 decades, just to say that based on what Professor Shahrani said, it was a rented state. And he makes an excellent point on that. That the Afghan state, its army, its police, its taxation system, the entire infrastructure of the state was in the service of the war on terror. And that is one of the reasons that the Americans and the NATO forces were very clear that we wanted a centralized government. Their intervention to 2003 constitutional law, Jirga, and how they essentially bought the warlords by paying them money. So the fourth point is what has not worked and lessons learned, and why we have this vicious cycles of violence and instability. Now, colleagues have talked about, including Bek said, about representation and voice, the discussion around legitimacy. I don't think we have figured that problem at all. And I want to go further and say that what we have right now with the Taliban is essentially goes back to the lack of representation and voice. Because historically, in that part of the country, Nurzais and Isaaqzais as key tribes were excluded from power sharing, from lacking voice and representation. And at the moment, the reason they're sticking to power in Kandahar and Kandahar is because of that Pashtun dynamic, tribal dynamics that exist. And that needs to be resolved because that is a key issue. So if you live in Panjwai Kandahar, where you have multiple tribes, the Nurzais, who were the dominant tribe in Panjwai Kandahar, were historically discriminated, were historically prejudiced against. And in the post-2001 era, there were very hardly any Nurzais within the Loy Kandahar in the administration. The administration was very much dominated by the Popalzais, the Alapalzais, and so forth. I think what needs to change, if I have time, I would like to discuss maybe 2-3 minutes on what needs to change and what is an ideal political system for Afghanistan. Is that okay?
Yes. Yes. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
No?
Yeah, go ahead. You have 5 more minutes. Don't worry about it. Thank you.
Well, I was talking to myself. So, I think we need to, our starting point needs to be, what is our goal as a nation? What the challenges that we have, which colleagues have highlighted, the vicious cycle of violence, lack of representation and voice, lack of economic growth and employment, lack of inability of the center to deliver services, and so forth. So those are the problems. I add one more thing, which is the inability of the state historically to contain conflict, not to resolve conflict, but to contain conflict at the district level. If you are a multi-ethnic, multi-tribal societies, you really need to focus on containing conflict at the local level. So just to give you an example, a conflict between the Nurzais and Popalzais in the south would exacerbate conflict from Kandahar to Herat to Faryab to Balwan, because the Popalzais would have grievances against, let's say, Nurzais in a particular conflict in Kandahar. That would incredibly exacerbate. We had the example of 2017, where we lost 62 checkpoints in just 2 hours because the Barakzais in Uruzgan flipped against the government over a minor dispute, and suddenly that had exacerbation across Herat and Kandahar and other places. So those kind of conflicts needs to be contained at the local level. Now, a balanced system for me, Bek talked a little bit, is looking at the core functions of the state. There are core functions of the state, there are concurrent functions of the state. The core functions of the state is foreign policy, making foreign policy, national security, law and order, micromanagement, macroeconomic management, fiscal management, and so forth. Those functions of the state could remain in the center, in Kabul, in the national government administration. But any other functions of the state, it really doesn't matter where you put it. Water management, health, road building, education. Those functions could go to districts, could go to provinces, could go to municipalities, and so forth. Or different administrations, local administration could do different things. So that is where innovation comes in. That is how we wanted to deconcentrate. That deconcentration came from Ashraf Ghani, to just give him credit on this. It came from him, but we worked towards that end. We came up with a 2-year plan and a 10-year plan. The idea was that we start with deconcentrating power on 5 key functions and then gradually shift all of the concurrent functions of the state to the district and provinces. What changed was because Amrullah Saleh became part of the ticket, and he convinced the president, I think politically, that this is not the way to go. And, in order for us to defeat the Taliban, we really need to centralize more power. And as Bek said, more power to municipality. Get them elected, get the district governors elected. The role of political parties are important. We need to redraw the boundaries of the villages and districts in Afghanistan, reduce the number of districts in the country, and so forth. Let me stop there. One of the other things that we added was regional development authorities that I can talk about, but at the moment, let me stop there and take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, we'll go on to the next talk, and then we'll do a Q&A. We'll have enough time after that. Dr. Zulfia Abawe is a lecturer in Global Business and cohort lead for the MBA Global Program at the Faculty of Business and Creative Industries, University of South Wales. She holds 3 postgraduate degrees, including a PhD in Law and Democracy, and has extensive analysis with a focus on Afghanistan's constitutional and institutional development. Her doctoral research critically examined Afghanistan's legal pluralism
through a gendered lens, highlighting its limited recognition within the 2004 Afghan constitution. Building on this, her current work advances the study of decolonial constitutionalism by exploring relationality and decoloniality as frameworks for understanding legal and political developments in Afghanistan, with a particular focus on local practices and decolonial knowledge production. The floor is all yours.
Thank you. How long do we have?
10 minutes.
Okay.
12.
Okay. I'm going to be very quick. I'm just going to start with a very short story. A few years ago, I was in Istanbul and I was explaining the art of haggling to a foreign friend who is from here. So I was very excited and I did everything I could to explain. And I said sometimes when you like an item in the shop, don't show too much enthusiasm and interest because the shopkeeper is not going to reduce the price. And sometimes you can also even leave the shop and they will call you back and they will give you a better price because it's the amount of lack of interest you show. And I was very confident in my own skills of explaining haggling to somebody who's not from the same culture. And I am somebody who have been doing haggling. So here comes the actual moment. I've been in a Grand Bazaar and I was haggling for a piece of jewelry. And my friend was with me. And then I was asking the shopkeeper, can you please reduce the price? And in that particular moment, he was nagging me. He was like, why don't you leave the shop? So that he can call you back. What I could not convey to him, and what even now resists precise articulation in words, was the decision is never mechanical. It emerges in relation to the context, the subtle cues of the shopkeeper, that exchange that happens, and the unspoken rhythms of the moment, the energy and the vibe, which sometimes you may not be able to explain it to anybody. It's about understanding relationships as dynamic, emerging, and unfolding processes that shape and reconfigure reality in the very act of being lived. As somebody who has lived both experiences, I think I'm in that gray zone where I can tell there's so much we can learn from people by allowing them to explain themselves. The haggling encounter was not about static roles, buyer versus seller, but about the interplay of gestures, silences, narratives, and shared meanings in that specific moment. Haggling, like relationality, I'm not going to go deep down into this, and I'm very aware that I've got a very diverse audience sitting in front of me and not everybody is academic. After lunch, I fall asleep, so I'm not going to bore you with that. But let's keep it to relationality. Haggling is not governed by universal formulas, but by contextually embedded processes performatively experienced and felt. It's not merely a transaction to achieve a fixed outcome, a lower price in this particular story, but a relationship in itself, negotiated, assembled, and contested through unequal yet interconnected dynamics. This story underscores the central argument of decolonial constitutionalism. I'm not going to talk about constitution, but constitutionalism. That systems, practices, and ways of knowing cannot be reduced to abstract principles, external rules, or imported frameworks. They must be understood in their own lived relationalities, as felt and practiced by the communities who inhabit them. What appears opaque, irrational, or even illogical when filtered through Western epistemologies, in fact, a coherent way of knowing grounded in lived experiences and relational intuition. As rightly argued by one of the scholars called Sperenberger, in the context of constitutionalism in Latin America, it carried colonial, exploitative, and genocidal impact solidified through the universal categories such as constitution and state. When I'm working about decoloniality, I go to a lot of different platforms, engaging with a lot of different people. What I've learned, decoloniality is not about creating binaries, oh, actually I'm against the West, or those type of things. Absolutely not. What decoloniality really is looking into is expansion of the spaces for epistemology. It actually, in kind of day-to-day language, it means, okay, your knowledge and my knowledge, let's come together and learn from each other. And let's expand that frame of reference from which we actually look into the reality. Let's expand our lens. It kind of reminds me of a very popular quote from Rumi, which I'm sure a lot of people in the audience might have heard before, which says, "Truth was a mirror in the hands of God. It fell and broke into pieces. Everybody took a piece of it, and they looked at it and thought they had the whole truth." So exactly the same way decoloniality is about looking into different types of epistemologies, way of knowing, way of learning, and accommodate that. If we don't, we have looked at how much hierarchy it creates. So I'm not going to go deeper in what I'm looking into this paper, but I'm just going to kind of mention a few key points before going to the case study, where again it's a very brief kind of engagement of women with elimination of violence against women units. So constitutionalism is not an innocent grammar of legitimate order, but it's part of a global regime that codifies Eurocentric subjectivities, most notably the abstract, autonomous citizen, and the monist sovereign state. Such subjectivities appear universal, yet they are historically specific, rooted in the epistemologies of Europe, and exported globally as part of the modern colonial project. Constitutions exemplify this paradox. They claim to guarantee freedom and equality while embodying forms of governance that privilege Eurocentric epistemologies, racialized subjectivities, and capitalist accumulation. The rhetoric conceals its own conditions of possibility. Emancipation for some is historically dependent on the subjugation of others. One of the scholars from Latin America, which I read a lot recently, his last name is Santos. One of the things which he refers to, that as individuals, we connect and we are basically living organics. We can't just abide by one particular legal system. We might want to mobilize different legal systems, and it's actually happening from different kind of places, different times. They keep moving. It's very complex in the societies, and that is what he calls it's called interlegality. So it says he's basically capturing another facet of this kind of colonial inheritance through his concept of abyssal thinking. Anything which is modern law, he argues, is organized by abyssal lines that separate what counts as law and what doesn't. Anything which is informal, which is lived, or it's custom, it doesn't kind of fall within that category of modern. Constitutions reproduce this abyssal divide by privileging one legal order, mostly the state, as the only legitimate form of legality, while relegating indigenous, religious, or communal norms to invisibility or illegality. This epistemic violence erases entire worlds of knowledge and normative practices. To decolonize constitutionalism, therefore, requires moving beyond monocultures of law to embrace ecologies of knowledge and interlegality, which means the coexistence of multiple legal orders or term of parity rather than subordination. So just a quick I'm now going to move on to the case study. Afghanistan is a country which has got a legal pluralistic legal pluralist society. When the US went to Afghanistan, let's just be very clear, it was about their interest. I wouldn't think otherwise. And there was an interesting documentary on Netflix if you'd like to watch it, and the language George Bush used when he was getting to Afghanistan. Anyways, the aim was to go and fight terrorism, and then in 2016 they said we cannot fight terrorism in isolation from the society, so we have to get into the society. That's where a little bit of direction went to the legal pluralism of Afghanistan, and they looked into the customary laws, and they were like, okay, yes, there is customary laws, but again, imported models of law was used in Afghanistan. One of the case study which I have looked at in more details was the elimination of violence against women units established in all prosecution services. It's a Norwegian woman, Whippelman. She has done a very good work on actually doing an ethnography of these cases. What happened and how these ABO units changed to a different site of contestation by the woman. A few case studies, like one of the case which I was looking at was women who have been, let's say, abused by their partner in terms of intimate partner violence. They were going to these ABO units, and because it was a foreign model, the punishment was either imprisonment or compensation. And the woman was like, if you put my husband in prison, who's going to look after us? He's the only breadwinner. And if you're asking for money, we can't afford that. How about we sit down and you speak to my husband or whoever was the abuser and ask them to come up with a guarantee letter. You write the guarantee letter, make them sign so they don't do the kind of abuse me again. And that was their way of coming up with a solution. For me personally, when I was looking at that, I was like, what if these hundreds of thousands of dollars weren't spent on those units and they would have actually engaged with the societies first, and that hybrid contestation site that ABO units changed to wouldn't have happened that way. And if you look at the other side of the case, for example, the prosecutors or the officials who were working in the ABO unit, many of them turned down women, and they were like, okay, so you're going against your family unit. And a lot of the stigma against those women. So a lot of the imported models which happened in Afghanistan were not driven from the reality of that particular society. No conversation has ever happened, hence the reason these models were all failed. I'm just going to finish now, and I would love to have more questions on this, and obviously thoughts and critical suggestions. Thank you so much, everybody.
All right, we have at least half an hour for Q&A, so you can all ask amazing questions. I'll just get you. I think we should have more questions for Timor first, because he has to leave in 20 minutes or so. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. So I'll just say a few words and then I'll open up the floor. So basically, thank you for again for asking me to chair this panel. I think Zalmai knows that federalism is one of my pet projects, and I'm really happy that it's actually being discussed in this forum in a proper way, both talking about decentralization and federalism. So I'm really glad that Timor actually mentioned the difference between decentralization and federalism. So my first question is going to be to you, and I'm just going to ask you, do you see this as a linear process? Do you want to decentralize? Do you imagine Afghanistan to decentralize first and then move into a federal model of governance, or can they operate in parallel, or how do you see it?
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Kalra. That's actually a great question. Question that technically we struggled with. Just to give you a little bit of a background here, in 2017, one of the reasons I joined the government was because Ashraf Ghani came up with a deconcentration plan, and he asked myself, and there were 4 other key young colleagues from different departments, including finance, MRT, and others, to come up with a plan. And what we proposed was something short-term until the 2019 elections, and then a long-term plan, a 10-year plan. So this is not a linear process, nowhere it has been a linear process. It comes with ups and downs, it comes with all sorts of compromises. One has to make compromises all the time. You might get it wrong, you might get it right. And you have to constantly work, like a machine, you have to constantly work on it to get it right. I don't think, and it has to be a unique experience as an agent. So the idea was that we deconcentrate gradually, just start with the 2 articles in the Constitution, the 137, 138, and 139 articles in the Constitution, that allowed the presidency to delegate its own authority to subnational administrations. So that's where we wanted to start. And that would give us a lot of power if we had gone with that. And in fairness, this is something he wanted. He he knew, he had worked in Indonesia, he knew that as Bek said, the system was failing Afghan population. People were not happy. There were so many grievances. We were losing the Taliban because of that very reason, lack of legitimacy, the inability to deliver services, inability to contain conflict at the local level. So we started with a 2-year plan. We wanted to start with 5 functions of the state. I think those were health, primary education, road building, at least I think it was 10 kilometers, energy, electricity, and health. And then once after election, we gradually shift towards taking all of the concurrent functions of the state to local administration. We also, as Bek said, mentioned, we wanted to give a lot more power to municipalities. So we wanted to test it. We had some funding. We wanted to test it in, I think, 3 municipalities, 1 big one, 1 small one, 1 medium size, so that we can have elections. And then the result of those, we could then take it to the rest of the country and say, this is working, let's do it. The same way that the UK has done. The UK started with London, then they did it in Manchester, I think they did it in Liverpool, and they now want to gradually increase it. So you need to pick up those lessons learned. And finally, what we wanted to do, not politically come up with regions along the historical regions of the country, but economically divide the country into 8 regions. And this is based on lessons learned from Colombia, from France, from Indonesia, where they had created regional development authorities. So these would be independent regional development authorities, because provinces were not working one another, districts were not working with another in terms of pooling resources and then investing in key industries so that they could generate jobs and wealth. Just to give you an example, if you divide this, come up with the western region of the country, Balkis, Iraq, Nimruz, and Abawe, that as a region would be an important economic hub where you put in $50 million in terms of investing in key industries such as marble, for instance. At the time, Turkmenistan was importing around $2 to $3 billion worth of marbles from Italy and Turkey and other places, where Afghanistan had 0 contribution to Turkmenistan. So you could do a lot more, and that was not a linear process. You had to make compromise all the time.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the board? Yes. First, let's start.
Hello. Okay. Timor, I'm a historian, so I'm going to ask you a question which might have something to do with the history. Based on your presentation, I got the impression they were still talking about the Ashraf Ghani era and transferring power from the center to the provinces. My impression is that maybe we're getting it a bit different. My idea was that, my understanding is that Ashraf Ghani and other presidents in Kabul were transferring power from provinces to the center by aligning with the original figures like Atta and Dostom and Ismail Khan, not the other way around. So there was neoliberal power in the center to transfer to the provinces, but quite vice versa. So one comment on that. So and then you talked about how Ashraf Ghani transferred power in certain aspect to the provinces and kept most important elements of power to himself in the center. So the question is, how can we transfer power to the peripheries if we still keep the budgetary control and the fiscal policies in the center and like giving no money to the peripheries but just empty promises or some letters that you are a governor but without any control over budgetary issues? And if we go a little bit back to the pre-modern era of Afghanistan, historically there has been 4 regions or 5 regions in the country which has been semi-independent. So we talk about Kandahar, Kabul, Herat, Balkh, and Badakhshan. So what was the Ashraf Ghani's and your colleagues' logic behind dividing the country into 8 divisions rather than 5 divisions? What was the historical or political justification behind this division? Thank you.
Timor, if you keep your answers just a little bit short, that will help. There are 2 more questions for you, and then I want to open the floor for Martin.
Amazing question, and as a historian, you would probably know a lot more than myself. Just to say, I'm not whitewashing Ashraf Ghani and what he did. I mean, I've written in my book about how one of the biggest failure was how he centralized power within the cabinet, within his office, which Big Sec can talk a lot more on this. So that, there's no doubt, I've written enough about him, how he contributed to further ethnicization of Afghanistan and concentrating power in the office, which was a failure. And not only that, but created a lot of parallel institutional structures undermine the state institution. That was the bigger failure. I think the vision was there. He understood it as a technical person, as a political animal. I think a figure, he got it completely wrong, but as a technical person, he understood it. So I want to clarify that. So not to say that he didn't centralize further power in his own. And he did it along what the Constitution allowed him. Okay, so the Constitution gave him incredible power, gave presidency incredible power, okay? But what I'm talking about, authority, procedures, and systems, and responsibilities. These are different things. When it comes to the technical evolution of state functions, okay? So in terms of his functions, this is what I thought, that the best way to depoliticize this whole issue is not talk about so much about power, but talk about responsibilities, authorities, and functions of the state, okay? And to discuss where we could take those functions. Who is responsible for health at the district level, at the provincial level, at the municipality level? Not the president, not the cabinet, not the ministries, but the local administration. So that's an issue. On the budgetary control, I completely agree with you. This was one of the key dilemmas that every single governor, provincial governor, district governor would raise, that we have no authority on the budget. It's the ministries that dictate us how many schools should be built, where the clinic should be built, how much money and resources we should allocate, not the people. And more importantly, the population had zero contribution whatsoever in the budgeting process. I'll give you an example. So the World Bank gave some money before I joined the government, 2014-15, I think. So they come up with a plan on reforming the budgetary system. And the idea was that we get the population will give their plans, their suggestions to the district government, to the provincial government. Provincial government will take those plans and suggestions to the Ministry of Finance, and the Ministry of Finance will include them into their budget. Yes, by 2017, I'll give you an example of Ghazni. Out of 502 plans that they proposed, only 6 of them were in the national budget. So that tells you a lot about the dilemma, the failure of not having budgetary control.
Timor, you have 1 minute, and then I need to ask Zara to ask her question, and then I need to move on to the other speakers.
I don't think I have a lot to say on the historical question. I'm not a historian. I think the regions, I wouldn't go, there were 5. My understanding was from during Ahmad Shah Abdali, there were 8 regions of the country. I've written it in my book. That's a different political entities compared to the process of regional development authorities that we were proposing.
Thank you. Zahra, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. My question is from Mr. Sharan. So obviously, there's lots of debate between Afghans in terms of state structures. Let's assume that we all accept the federalism structure of states in Afghanistan. My question is that will federalism help bring more peace and social justice, or will ethnic, language, and religion conflicts worse? And obviously, it's very sad to say that Afghanistan is facing with a kind of puzzle, chicken and eggs, and we all get confused how to solve it. Thank you very much.
I'll ask there was another hand there, and that'll be the last question for Timor, and then we'll move on to the other speakers.
Thank you very much. Very impressive speeches and presentations on different aspects of this important topic. It's actually more of a reflection. I was working with the United Nations Development Program, and we were involved in the very early stage of state formation post 2001 in Afghanistan. So we did provide a lot of opportunities for the government policymakers to look at comparative contexts. We took them to different countries, to India, to Malaysia, Philippines, and it's also a response to the question you put to the panelists. So decentralization or federalism, these are inherently political. I mean, we can talk about these technical aspects of how much power to devolve on fiscal or other technical management aspects. So it is individual management and also shared management of a country. So I think it's also related to the point that Professor Sharan this morning mentioned about the political culture. So this is power cannot be devolved. It's against human nature. So everyone likes to keep the power to themselves. So at the very early stages of state formation, so UNDP provided a report which resulted in creation of the Department of Local Governance. Gradually, as the power concentrated in presidential palace, there was resistance towards accepting proposals on devolving power. So a fundamental question is how can we, for example, why we didn't decentralize Kabul municipality? I mean, it was under government control, mayor election was in the constitution, so it didn't happen. So it is not something that you could wait for the political leadership to give it to the peripheries. It's an inherently political process. And because of lack of formation of that political culture, we didn't have political parties, we didn't have, the local power was not really formed in a form of legal process. It was powerful people in power, and the fear in center was that if they moved toward devolving more power to the center, so these provinces would become independent or separate or whatever. So
thank you.
that's
any response?
no question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This was the reflection.
All right, so you have a minute to respond to both those questions.
Thank you. Just to say that to Zara's question, no system is perfect, whether federalism or no federalism. You look at Pakistan, which is a federalism political system, and look at the ethnic dynamics in Pakistan, and look at what the Baluchs are and the Pashtuns are suffering in Pakistan. It's just incredible. Federalism has not guaranteed protection for these marginalized groups in Pakistan. So no system is perfect, whether it's centralized or decentralized.
Okay.
The UNDP, yes, we looked at 20 countries. We reflected on different countries, including Indonesia. Indonesia in 1992 was about to break up into different islands. There is a 16,000 island. What they did, they decentralized. And then by 2001, realized they made a mistake of decentralizing too much. So they then centralized power a little bit. Now with the current tension, they're discussing what else they could do in terms of deconcentrating. So that is the art of playing with a political system to ensure that power is with the people, not with one individual or with the cabinet, and that you put enough checks and balances within the system. And just very quickly on Kabul, Yes, Kabul election never happened for political reason and for ethnic reasons. That is to do with the composition of Kabul city. No one wanted to lose control of the Kabul city along ethnic lines. Therefore, they decided that they don't want to have elections. That's the reality. And that is exactly the compromise we need to talk about. And Istanbul is a good example where they have a bigger municipality, but they also have sub-municipalities where they try to resolve this issues. So you can play with the system and design cleverly to address these issues. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I'll open the floor up for both Matin Bek and Zulfia. I'll just ask one question for Martin. Who do you learn from? I've heard from, sort of piggybacking on what the board just said, they looked at France and they looked at Latin America, but would you actually look at India, for example, which is a federal system, or Russia for that matter, Brazil? All the big countries are federal in their own right, they have their own multi-ethnic makeup. So would you only look far away and to Europe, or would you actually look closer home? So it was another interesting makeup. I won't go into the details, but anyway, I'll throw it out there. And actually, along with that, for Zulfia, same thing, when we're decolonizing knowledge, are we looking at still Eurocentric understandings of what we are decolonizing? Are we still going to only talk about state as legitimate and not, or talk about religion, multiple legal orders? Does that put us right back into where we started, which is that we are trying to mold Afghanistan into a Western understanding of a nation state? I will. Martin, first you, and then Zulfia.
Thank you. Well, I have another co-panelist, if you allow me.
Hello.
Well, honestly, I mean, India, of course, gave me context, and I studied 5 years in India. But it was a not any way to implement that Indian model. But what I was puzzled when it comes to Afghanistan's case, I was saying how the world has developed, how humans are able to invent their own way of political system to address their problems. So I was not looking for a particular model. Dr. Sharan very beautifully mentioned, no system is perfect. I was looking for a unique political system which could address our own problems and keeping the ethnic sensitivities. You know, when I joined government, those days, talking about federalism was a completely political taboo. The same way about decentralization, they were not a topic to talk about. And there was a lot of ethnic sensitivities, and the whole discussion has become politicized. As I mentioned, when I started working in the government, I knew individuals or governors, they were, in their public talk, they were strongly pro-centralized system, but after being governor and realizing there is flaw in the system, he would himself come to me saying, look, this model doesn't work. We have to find a solution. We have to go beyond this. If we want the provinces to develop, and if we want to have ownership in the provinces, if we want to give people platform to raise their voices, or fill the government or the governor or local authority responsible. As Dr. Sharan mentioned, those things were working mainly through within the system. What the current system allows us, how much we could deconcentrate. For example, I'll give you an example. In 2014, when Dr. Ashraf Ghani was in charge of security transition, and I was the deputy director of local governance, I used to travel with him to all provinces in the countryside. It was an amazing experience. So we had a visit in Iran. That time, Dr. Shah Sabah, he was a visionary leader and a very well-educated person. and a very efficient governor, I must say. And he complained. He said, look, here's Iran, and for every single thing, I have to request call. For example, we had Khalid the other day. It was a port in the part of Iran. We needed, for example, the governor needed more staff to maintain it. For every issue, every small maintenance he raised, the governor had to come to Kabul and talk to the Ministry of Information and Culture, because that for the tourism used to come after the Ministry of Culture. So then the Ministry of Culture, if going to increase their staff in that port, they have to increase the staff all around the country. Anywhere we have other provinces of port, they have to do one standard for all. So that time we thought we should have come, at least we should be able, within the system, to concentrate at least or in a way we were talking about, if the political question is problematic, the political representation or election of the governor, we might leave that aside. Let's start by administrative and fiscal decentralization. Or in a way, deconcentration would be probably the right political term for it. Because with decentralization, we usually mean the election of the governors or mayors. But that was one of the things. And I would say still, Afghanistan has its own unique problems. And beside what Dr. Sharan mentioned about the function of the state, which we're working on, we definitely need the political decentralization as well. I can give many examples. For example, if a governor...
Okay, can I stop you there and then we can talk about
Thank you. I mean, I would say we need our own model.
Sure. Okay. Zulfia, please. Yeah.
I think as somebody, it's just when I look at Afghanistan, I'm very cautious of borrowing or importing any other model from any other country. I would love to learn as much as I can and just to kind of test that this is not going to work for that country. When I was working on my research, and I'm still working on the research, I could see a lot of really good anthropology, ethnography done in Afghanistan back in 1970s, 1960s. But the past, before the proper information coming out to make me understand the reality of Afghanistan, I wouldn't kind of work on any other model when I actually don't know much on how am I going to decentralize or centralize power. And just one other statement, when it comes to state building and nation building in Afghanistan, again, based on my research, it has never worked for that country. The state building in the West, the way it has been mainstreamed and streamlined, it has worked in a lot of the countries in the West. It doesn't necessarily have to work for Afghanistan. And one of the things which I personally don't understand is that why are we pushing for the same thing, expecting different outcomes? So if it comes down to our own capacities and how much we can change, when it comes to my kind of research, I wouldn't want to import any other model and implement it in Afghanistan when it comes to state building. Real work takes time. If you really want to work for Afghanistan, there has to be real work done to really know the values which that country has, and it has to be understood, worked with, and new models should be driven from bottom up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any... Okay, last two questions. Anybody else who wants to ask the question?
First of all, I will take this opportunity to say that I didn't read the article being published by Dr. Sharan. I thank him. I have to check his references. But since I'm the member of the National Resistance Front, we haven't presented any political preferences at the moment. I don't know where that classification is coming from. I really hope that I will keep that conversation with him privately next time. My question is for Bek, which is a good friend of mine. Good to see you after a long time, my friend. Political decentralization is, I think, an important topic we need to discuss more than technicality. Technicality could be context specific, it could be different from one place to another place, but the whole idea at the moment, the whole debate is facing with political technology, specifically among the political elite. So, what's the solution, and how we could? I'm hearing so much depoliticization about this topic that in the course of time, every day, the topic becomes hotter and hotter, and we don't see any rationality when it comes to talking. And you have been very kind and I think very brave to say that even the president, our former president, acknowledged the fact that the system is not working, even though he wanted to continue that vicious cycles, which is going to the next stage with the Taliban at the moment. So what is the solution, and how we would be able to take this topic out of political sensitivity and find a rational way to address it in a long term? Thank you so much. My apologies, my question took some time.
Martin, would you like to answer briefly? I think everybody needs a coffee, so the briefer the better.
Thank you, Johnson. I believe this is a very interesting topic, and for a lot of reasons, it has to be honest and not in a toxic way. The problem is when we talk about this sort of system, it's become very toxic and very ethnicized. My understanding is those who have worked in the government, they understand much better the system was not working. What I'm talking about, those who were pro-centralized system, but deep down, with everyone I said, with every one of them, they've admitted to me, no, the system doesn't work, we have to change it. I think that we need to have a discussion among the political elite in a very rational, in a closed door environment, and de-emphasize, like it's become, as I say, ethnicized. It's more that I think look on the benefit of that and how to honor, as I said earlier, you don't have to copy from anywhere else and come with a roadmap, evolutionary, how to go ahead. Recently, I heard for some of them, they had the courage to admit that we have to go to decentralized system. Those who used to, in the past, objected. But I think there's a chance. I mean, if we have good political discussion among our elite, in a closer environment, to talk, not to label each other. And I thank the Mosaic for facilitating this discussion, but I believe we need more people on the board from two islands. Those who oppose, those who approve. And rational people, which we have money. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. It's time for the info. Thank you to the panelists and thank you for all listening.